An apple a day keeps the doctor away. You have probably heard this before. Maybe a grandparent said it to you once, while peeling one for you at the kitchen table. Maybe you just heard it somewhere, without ever really thinking about what it meant. But did you ever wonder if it is actually true? Or is it just something people say? Nice-sounding words about an apple, with nothing real behind them. I have a quick question for you. Do you eat an apple regularly, or is it a fruit you almost never think about? Tell us in the comments. We are curious how many of you already have this habit, and how many of you, like a lot of people, simply forget apples exist. Today, we are going to find out what is really going on, not by guessing, and not by repeating an old saying one more time, by looking closely at exactly what happens inside your body when you eat one whole apple every single morning. Today's habit is very small. Eat one whole apple every morning before you eat anything else. Not apple juice, not apple sauce. The whole apple, with the skin, eaten slowly, bite by bite. Here is the question for today. What actually happens inside your body if you eat one apple every single morning? By the end of this episode, you will know the answer, and you will know exactly what to do tomorrow morning. One small thing. One apple. That is all. Let's start. First, let's talk about why apples rarely become a real habit for most people. It is not because apples are expensive or hard to find. There are real reasons, and every one of them makes sense. Start with the simplest one. Apples are too ordinary to seem important. An apple is not a trend. It is not a new superfood with a special name. It looks exactly the way it has always looked, sitting in the same bowl it always sits in. Because it is so familiar, it is easy to walk past it and reach for something that feels newer, more exciting. On top of that, a lot of people think any fruit will do, so there seems to be no real reason to choose apples specifically. Eat more fruit is advice almost everyone has heard, but that advice feels general, not specific. There seems to be no particular reason to reach for an apple instead of a banana, an orange, or whatever happens to be on the counter that day. There is something else working against apples too, and it has to do with effort. Chewing feels like more work than people want in the morning, especially when they still feel half asleep. A soft, easy food, something you do not have to chew much, simply feels more appealing first thing in the morning. An apple asks you to bite, chew, and keep chewing, which can feel like more work than a smoothie, a piece of toast, or a sip of juice. Then there is the saying itself. Nobody ever really explains it, so it just stays a saying. An apple a day keeps the doctor away, gets repeated constantly, but rarely explained. Without a real reason behind it, it starts to feel like an old expression, with no actual meaning, easy to dismiss as something people say without truly believing it. Apples can also feel inconvenient compared to other breakfast options. A piece of toast can be eaten with one hand on the way out the door. A smoothie can be made the night before and grabbed quickly. An apple needs to be washed, held, and chewed slowly while standing or sitting still, which can feel like it does not fit into a rushed morning the way other foods seem to. And finally, there is a quieter reason, one that has nothing to do with convenience at all. People sometimes worry about the sugar in fruit without understanding the difference between fruit sugar and other kinds. Some people have heard that sugar in general is something to be careful about, and they apply that same worry to fruit without realizing that the sugar in a whole apple behaves very differently inside the body than the sugar in candy or soda. Without that distinction explained clearly, apples can end up grouped together with foods they are actually quite different from. All of these reasons make complete sense. Nobody is doing anything wrong by walking past apples in favor of something else. Today, you are going to learn exactly what is happening inside an apple and inside your body that makes this small, old habit worth taking seriously. So, what actually happens when you eat an apple? Let's keep this simple. An apple contains natural sugar. That sugar is real and your body does notice it. But an apple also contains something called fiber, a part of the fruit your body cannot break down quickly the way it breaks down sugar. That fiber changes everything about how the sugar behaves once it is inside you. Instead of all of that sugar reaching your bloodstream quickly, the fiber slows the whole process down. The sugar enters your body more steadily, spread out over a longer stretch of time, rather than arriving all at once in a sudden rush. This matters because a sudden rush of sugar, the kind you might get from candy or a sugary drink, often leads to a sudden drop afterward, the kind that leaves you feeling hungry and a little low on energy not long after. A steadier release, the kind fiber creates, tends to leave you feeling fuller for longer, without that same drop. There is another piece to this, and it has to do with chewing itself. Each bite of a whole apple takes real time and effort to chew completely. That repeated chewing, again and again, takes noticeably longer than simply drinking a glass of apple juice, where all of that chewing work has already been removed before the liquid ever reaches your mouth. This slower process seems to help your body register that you have actually eaten something. Many people find that eating a whole apple leaves them feeling more satisfied than drinking the same amount of apple juice, even when the juice technically contains a similar amount of natural sugar from the same fruit. Apple juice, in fact, has had most of its fiber removed during the process of making it. What is left behaves much more like a sugary drink than like the apple it came from. The sugar arrives quickly, without that same steady release the whole fruit provides. Many people working in nutrition say that eating whole fruit, rather than drinking its juice, is one of the simplest ways to actually benefit from the fiber fruit naturally contains. The fruit itself has not changed. What changes is whether you eat it the way it grew, or only drink what is left once the fiber has been taken out. You can think of fiber a little like a sponge sitting inside the apple, holding onto the sugar as it moves through your body, releasing it gradually rather than letting it all loose at once. Without that sponge, as in apple juice, the sugar moves freely and quickly, much like water poured straight out of a glass instead of squeezed slowly out of something that holds it back. Apples are not the only food that works this way. Oats, beans, and whole grains all carry their own kind of fiber too, slowing things down in a similar manner. But an apple happens to be one of the easiest of these foods to eat first thing in the morning, with no bowl, no cooking, and no real preparation needed at all. This steady release also affects something many people notice without realizing why: how their energy feels throughout the morning. A quick rush of sugar, followed by a quick drop, can sometimes feel similar to that jittery, then suddenly tired, feeling some people get after a very sugary drink. A steadier release, the kind a whole apple provides, tends to avoid that sharp rise and fall, leaving energy feeling more even throughout the next couple of hours. To see this in real life, picture someone you might recognize. There was a person who, most mornings, ate something soft and sweet, a small pastry, or sometimes nothing at all besides coffee. By the middle of the morning, hunger would return quickly, often pulling them toward something else sweet to snack on, again and again throughout the day. One week, almost as an experiment, they decided to eat one whole apple first, before anything else, every single morning. They did not change anything else about their routine. Same breakfast afterward, same coffee, same schedule. By the end of that week, they noticed something. That mid-morning hunger, the one that always sent them looking for a snack, came later than usual and felt noticeably less urgent when it finally did arrive. They were not eating less food overall. They were simply eating it differently, with one small, steady piece added right at the very start. There is a second story worth hearing too, this one about the apple and its juice, side by side. There was someone who used to drink a glass of apple juice most mornings, believing it was a healthy way to start the day, since it came from real fruit after all. One morning, out of simple curiosity, they decided to eat a whole apple instead of pouring the juice. They were surprised by how much longer it took to finish, and even more surprised by how much longer they felt satisfied afterward, compared to how quickly hunger usually returned after the juice. The fruit had not changed. What had changed was the fiber that came along with it this time, instead of being left behind in the juicer. One more story shows how this can work for more than just one person at a time. This one is about a parent trying to build the habit for their whole family, not just themselves. Every morning before school, their child wanted something quick, usually a glass of juice grabbed on the way out the door, never anything that required sitting still and chewing. The parent started slicing a whole apple and placing it next to the breakfast plate each morning, alongside whatever else was already part of the routine, without removing the juice entirely at first. Slowly, over a couple of weeks, the apple slices started disappearing faster than the juice did. The child never announced any grand decision to eat healthier. They simply kept reaching for the apple slices, perhaps because the crunch was satisfying, perhaps because they genuinely felt fuller afterward, without ever needing to understand the reason why. Watching this happen, the parent eventually started slicing a second apple, one for themselves, without ever really deciding to. It had simply become part of preparing breakfast, the same way pouring 2 glasses of milk instead of one would have felt completely normal. So now you understand what is actually happening when you eat a whole apple. But here is where it is easy to get this wrong. People sometimes think any form of apple should work the same way. Apple juice, apple sauce, dried apple chips, as long as it technically came from an apple at some point. That is not quite accurate. The fiber matters, and fiber lives mainly in the flesh and the skin of the fruit, not in juice that has been pressed and strained away from those parts. So, what does doing this properly actually look like? Eat the whole apple. Wash it first, then eat it as it is, skin included, unless you have a specific reason to peel it. Do not turn it into juice. Do not cook it down into sauce. Simply wash it and eat it, the same way it grew. Eat it before anything else in the morning, on an empty stomach, before your usual breakfast, before your coffee if possible. This does not mean replacing breakfast entirely. It simply means the apple comes first, as a small step before whatever else you usually eat. There is no need to buy a special or expensive variety. Any apple works for this habit. What matters far more than the type of apple is simply choosing the whole fruit consistently rather than its juice. If chewing a whole apple first thing in the morning feels strange at first, especially if your mornings have always started with something soft, give yourself a few mornings to adjust. Many people say the habit starts to feel completely normal after about a week of doing it consistently. Keep apples somewhere visible, in a bowl on the counter, or somewhere you will naturally see them each morning, rather than tucked away inside the refrigerator where they are easy to forget entirely. Apples are also one of the more affordable fruits in most grocery stores, especially when bought in season, which means this habit rarely puts any real strain on a weekly budget. If you travel, or your mornings sometimes happen away from home, this habit still works almost anywhere. Apples are sold in nearly every grocery store, convenience store, and market, which makes them one of the easiest fruits to keep this habit going wherever your mornings happen to take you. You also do not need to eat the exact same kind of apple every day. Different varieties taste slightly different, some sweeter, some more tart, some softer, some firmer. Trying a few different kinds can help keep the habit from feeling repetitive, even though the fiber and the basic benefit stay roughly the same no matter which variety you choose. When you do this every morning, eating an apple before anything else simply becomes the way mornings start, the same way checking your phone or making coffee already does. You stop deciding whether to do it. It becomes the first small thing that happens every single day. So here is what you can do. Tomorrow morning, right after you wake up, before you eat anything else, eat one whole apple. Wash it, then eat it as it is. No cutting it into juice. No cooking it down. Just one whole apple, eaten slowly, bite by bite, before the rest of your breakfast. So, remember, tomorrow morning, before you eat anything else, one whole apple. That is the one thing. Can you try this? I think you can. It costs very little. It needs no preparation at all. And by the middle of tomorrow morning, you might notice that familiar hunger arriving a little later and feeling a little less urgent than it usually does. We are almost at the end of today's episode, but before we finish, let me paint one small picture for you. Tomorrow morning, you wake up. Before you reach for coffee, before you reach for anything else, you pick up one apple. You wash it. You take the first bite. You hear the crunch. The taste is a little sweet, a little sharp, cold from sitting on the counter overnight. You eat it slowly, all the way to the end, one bite after another. Nothing else about your morning changes. You still drink your coffee. You still eat your usual breakfast afterward. But somewhere in the middle of the morning, right around the time you usually start feeling hungry again, reaching for something sweet, that feeling arrives a little later than usual and feels a little less strong when it finally does. Not because the apple was magic, just because something inside it, fiber mostly, quietly did its job, steadily, the whole morning through. So maybe that old saying was not entirely wrong after all. Let's remember what we talked about today. An apple has natural sugar, but it also has fiber, which slows down how that sugar enters your body. Because of fiber, eating a whole apple gives you steadier energy than something with sugar but no fiber. Chewing a whole apple, bite by bite, takes more time than drinking juice, and that matters too. Eating the whole apple, not just drinking apple juice, keeps the fiber that does most of this work. One apple, eaten before anything else in the morning, is a small habit that needs no preparation at all. Tomorrow morning, before you eat anything else, one whole apple. That is the one thing. Now let's go over our words for today. Crunch. You hear the crunch. That sound alone can wake up your senses a little. Fiber. An apple has fiber, something your body uses slowly, not all at once. Sugar. An apple has sugar, but it is not the same as the sugar in candy. Steady. The sugar in an apple enters your body steadily, not in one sudden rush. Bite. Each bite takes time to chew, more time than drinking a glass of juice. Whole. Eating the whole apple, skin and all, is different from drinking apple juice. If this was helpful, listen again, or share it with a friend who wants to learn English and feel better in the morning. And tell us in the comments, will you try this tomorrow morning, or do you already eat an apple most days? See you next time.